Hello and welcome. Welcome to session number 1 of our videos that are designed to help you look at and better understand this life from a more material point of view. In these video sessions we will seek greater understanding on why conditions in this country and around the world, in the United States that is, and around the world, are preventing the solving of major problems in the lives of everyday people. Now, in the beginning, I would like to take just a moment to apologize to you because at times during these, when I break to finish one session and begin another, I've done my best to make sure that they are in a logical break point, but sometimes because of the link limitations of YouTube, it's necessary to cut them off at a little less than desirable point. But I will try to take up where I will always pick up where we left off in the next video. So if you will bear with me, I would be very grateful. So we'll continue at this time. There is no doubt, I will begin by saying, in my mind, that most of you who are interested enough in the United States and the rest of the world around us, that you would want to read what is revealed in these videos that deal with the world from a material point of view, probably already feel, and many of you feel it rather strongly, that you have already a fairly good understanding of how things work. Not only how things work in the United States, but also why things are the way they are, what's needed to fix the problems if you perceive any problems, and so on. Many of you will totally reject, while others of you will initially reject what you see in one or in both series of videos. Those that talk about the material world and the other series that I call Wisdom for the Ages, parts 1 through 32, that talk about matters from a more spiritual perspective. Here though, when we're talking about things from a material point of view, we'll consider only from the material viewpoint, and as I said, some of you will reject it simply because the content doesn't fit what you've been taught from childhood. Some of you may reject it in part or totally because you believe that much of it appears to you to be too liberal, and others may do the same because they believe that too much of it appears to them to be too conservative. I know these things because all of that applied to me more than 30 years ago when I first began to become aware of the information that you'll find here. I rejected most of it then, as a great many of you will now. But I'm grateful for the fact that at that time I did not completely close my mind to the possibility, no matter how small, that there might be a few shreds of truth in there, somewhere. So as time went by, I watched very carefully, with even more of an open mind, what was happening. Over a period of time, quite a lengthy period, I slowly began to analyze what I was observing, and to do this to a much greater degree than I had bothered to do so in the past. Gradually, over time again, and after a great deal of thought and prayer, I began to see and to realize that there were far more than a few shreds of truth in the information that I had learned and was learning. It actually was the way things really worked. All I'm asking you to do is keep an open mind, pay attention to what you see going on in the country and in the world around you, pray about it if it seems the right thing for you to do, and see if over time it doesn't begin to add up to that which will be called to your attention here. Then be receptive to the answers to your prayers. These answers may come from any source. Some may be unexpected, but you'll very likely experience the realization that it's the answer you've sought. When it comes, you'll recognize it as such. If you will do only that much to meet me halfway, many of you will find that what you learn here will strike a chord within you that will ring more and more true as you watch and analyze further over time. There are others who will find that it is more of a stretch than they are ready to make at this time. But for those of you who are ready to know more now, I will say, welcome to the real world. We'll now begin to give you the information promised, starting with an understanding of the true nature of politics and reality in the United States and around the world. Wrong thinking in specific areas of great importance have separated and polarized us politically as a people and as a nation, almost to the point of being irreparable. This fact is true not only for the United States of America, but for many other nations also. By the time you finish watching the videos that deal with the material aspects of our lives here, you'll better understand why this has happened, who is benefiting from it, why both sides share in the blame, and why many of those responsible continue, even now, to do everything in their power to keep our country moving in the same very wrong and very dangerous direction that we've been going for a good many years now. Even though things appear to have slowed down a bit since the election of 2008, as far as moving in the wrong direction, that is, nevertheless, there are still a great many changes that need to be made that are not very likely to happen because of very intense lobbying interests that are working diligently day and night, using a method that is nothing more than legalized bribery, which is lobbying, to make certain that these much-needed changes do not take place. These lobbying interests are paid for by the corporate structure of the United States and other countries, and by those ultra-wealthy persons and families who are so very heavily invested in the success and the high profits of that corporate structure. If these needed changes do eventually begin to take place, the changes, are very likely to be stymied to the point that they will be watered down or made relatively ineffective, as generally happens today. Two political parties pretty much totally dominate American politics today. Excuse me. In other countries, there may often be more than two political parties, but two often tend to be dominant. In many ways, they appear on the surface to differ significantly in ideology, in that those who see themselves as conservatives in this country generally consider themselves, in the United States again, to be represented by the Republican Party, while those in the United States who see themselves as more moderate or even as liberals or progressives generally consider themselves to be represented by the Democrat Party. For the purposes of the parts that deal with the material world perspective in our videos, since the speaker lives in the United States and is more familiar with that country and its politics and issues, we will tend to focus our attention there. But the basic concepts involved are likely to hold true for a number of other countries and their political parties and issues, just as they do in the United States. That is, of course, an oversimplification of politics in the United States, but it will help you to better understand the situation and will therefore suffice for the moment. Obviously, there are degrees of conservative and liberal philosophy, and we will consider some of those later. It might surprise you to learn that at the top levels, neither party, despite protestations to the contrary, is truly dedicated to having the best interests of the average working family as their primary focus. The primary focus of far too many party leaders and other elected officials in each party, at the national and even at the state level, is to first get elected, carry out the party objectives, find ways to pay back the big contributors and keep them happy, and keep the electorate just satisfied enough to get their vote again, and then get reelected over and over and over again. They do all of these things in order to maintain the status quo, keep themselves in power, or even worse, by trying to strangle the government and make it totally ineffective by further cutting taxes and or regulations, even more so than has been done already. I'm aware that what I have stated will seem to be extremely cynical and maybe even could be accused of shooting from the hip kind of statement, but if you really take the time to think about the growing level of poverty in America and about the lack of educational and healthcare opportunities that are affordable to the average working families and to the poor, regardless of the party in power, then it shouldn't be too difficult to come to that same conclusion. I want to thank you for watching. In our next video, number 2, we will continue from this point. Thank you again.